what's going on? Welcome back to the GOAT Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Neander. Welcome back to another episode. We've got a good one for you today. We're right in the middle of our AFC divisional preview shows. We've already done the AFC West, the AFC East, already uploaded, ready on YouTube. Go ahead and check those videos out. But today, we're going to be focused on the AFC North. Great division, a lot of great teams led by number one quarterback Lamar Jackson from the Baltimore Ravens. So let's get right into it and see what's going to happen there. For today's show, we brought in our very good friend Mike Mac McNaughton. He's going to be helping us out. And without waiting any longer, here we go. Let's get ready. Let's do the AFC North. All right, so now welcome in Mike McNaughton. Mike, how's it going today?
Good, man. Good to be on again.
Yeah, hey, thanks for joining us. If you guys remember, Mike was with us for our draft night special. We had a lot of fun that night, so we definitely wanted to bring you back as soon as we could. So, yeah, everybody knows what's going on here. We're doing our divisional breakdowns. We're in the AFC, and we're going to go to the AFC North now. Lots of firepower in this division. There are plenty of interesting storylines, lots of new faces. You know, there's just a lot to unpack in this division, and it starts with the Baltimore Ravens, right? They were one of the powerhouses for fantasy last year, almost got to the Super Bowl. And they're going to be one of the favorites this year, not only to win, to get to the Super Bowl, but to lead fantasy teams to the Super Bowl. And that starts with their rushing attack. So they were first in the league in points scored per game, 33.1 points. Also first in the league with 206 rushing yards per game, a smooth 62 yards more than the second place team, the 49ers. So pretty impressive there. With the passing yards, they only had 201 yards a game. It was 27th in the league, but Lamar Jackson had 36 touchdowns. He led the league in touchdowns with not a lot of attempts. It was an extraordinarily efficient season for him. You add in the rushing. You hate to call it once in a lifetime, once in a career kind of a season because it was his first one, but it could be that way. So we'll have to find out here. But a lot of people are going to pay up for Lamar Jackson. The big question will be, how high is Lamar going in fantasy drafts? How high are you willing to draft him? So I'm seeing him go in the middle of the second round. And I got to tell you, if you told me he's going to have the same exact season he had last year, I still don't know that I'd pick him up in the second round. So what do you think about his ADP, and what do you think about your expectations for him this season?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm in total agreement there. Second round is too high for me. Again, the always the impending injury issue with the amount that they're asking him to carry the ball. And the reason that he was so efficient last year is because of the way they run the football as an offense, not only with their running backs, but with Lamar Jackson. When you have that sort of RPO style of offense, there are so many moving parts that it takes defenses a while to adapt. And most of the time, the quarterback is the one who is running into open gaps because, he drops back to pass. There's nothing open. He's athletic and fast, and he takes off, and boom, you have a big play. My fear is you take him in the second round. You think it's going to be a season like it was last year. Most of the time with historic seasons, you don't see a follow-up. Pat Mahomes and his massive touchdown numbers, granted, the guy's a stud. He had another great season, but it wasn't on that level again. Same situation I think you'll experience with Lamar Jackson. So if you take him in the second round, just understand that the follow-up to historic type of numbers and seasons don't normally happen 2 years in a row. And you can look at him back in college. Same thing. He had a massive season. He came back the next year and he underperformed.
Yeah, it's difficult because, you look at him as a league winner last year, and he was on, one of the highest percentage of championships teams. But, as we spoke about before, a lot of that's because of where you got him, right? 2 years ago, you got Mahomes late in the draft, and then he had his amazing season. Last year, you got Lamar Jackson late in the draft. He had an amazing season. So I think the better play is looking for the guy that might be the next guy that you can draft in the 8th round or later. That could be a top 5 quarterback, as opposed to hoping another one of these guys, repeats one of these kind of performances. So let's say, the guys in your league are getting a little bit nervous. They also don't want to draft a quarterback. Now it's that awkward waiting game where every single pick, someone's like, all right, is it going to be this pick? It's going to be this pick.
Right.
Now it's like the end of the 3rd round. It's the beginning of the 4th round. I mean, is there any way you pass up, or what's kind of the breaking point where you think, then you got to draft him? It's too much value.
Yeah, too much value. I would say round 4. It's absolutely too much value in round 4 to pass up for me. Especially if I'm in the middle part to the late part of the 4th round and he's still there, I'd take him. Again, me as far as just from a pure football perspective, I am not the biggest Lamar Jackson fan just because I think that injury risk is so high because of how athletic everybody in the NFL is. So, I mean, look, we saw it with Mike Vick. I mean, let's not dress this up like we haven't seen guys like this before. We have,
Yeah.
albeit only one or two.
Now blew up, for his rookie season.
Right. So just to make sure that everybody is aware of kind of my stance. But once you get into round 4, the value's there, and it's high value.
So, let's keep talking about this rushing game because they did make, quite an interesting addition in the draft. The rich got richer. They added J.K. Dobbins, one of the highest ranked, running backs in the draft class. A lot of people had him as the number 1. Some people had him, that high. Out of Ohio State, winds up going in the 2nd round there. And, you have Mark Ingram. You still have Justice Hill back there, who was drafted, I think was a 3rd round draft pick, I feel like last year.
Yeah, out of Oklahoma State, I believe.
Yeah, so decent draft capital put into Hill, and now they get, Dobbins. I don't think anybody thinks that he's going to supplant Ingram right away as the number 1. There's no reason to really, think that's the way it's going to go. The bigger question is how much does it impact Ingram's, value? He was the number 8 running back last year in 15 games. And I think most people have him outside the top 12, outside the RB1 range. But I'm seeing him as like RB15 in a lot of places, kind of 13 to 16. Personally, he's going to be more in the 22 to 26 range for me, more than likely. And a big part of that's just going to be the way all this averages out because they're not going to have 200 yards a game again. And then just, spreading it around more. You don't spend a 2nd round pick and not give the guy 7 to 10 touches a game. So I'm going to bump him down pretty far. What do you think about for Mark Ingram?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to affect how much he gets the ball as much as some other people do. I still think that to me, the J.K. Dobbins pick, even though they got him in the 2nd round, I think that to me, that's a pick where they're saying, listen, Mark Ingram's getting a little long in the tooth. We don't think Justice Hill is a guy that we want to be our, top of the depth chart running back on this team. They found that guy in J.K. Dobbins in the 2nd round. It to me sounds like it's a pick for the future, not necessarily for the present time. So I don't think it's going to affect him tremendously. Mark Ingram, that is. He will get touches, J.K. Dobbins. He's going to get touches. He's going to get carries. But ultimately, I think it's going to be a lot less than maybe what would have an impact. I think the bigger impact to Mark Ingram's numbers and touches are going to be the fact that they went out, they picked up a running back or a wide receiver in Devin Duvernay. Looks like they want to give Lamar Jackson some more weapons to throw the football. And I mean, you can't play this game with 2 footballs. I mean, you only have one. So there's only so much, there's finite touches to go around. And then taking into account now we're in another year of this offense. So defenses are going to wise up a little bit, and they're going to have plans in place to try to combat what they do with that RPO offense. So that could lead to some fewer possessions, which means fewer touches. I don't think it's going to affect Mark Ingram all that much because I think he's a kind of a cornerstone to that offense. But yeah, J.K. Dobbins won't have that big of an impact, I don't believe, in year 1.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Mark Ingram's going to be pretty much off my board unless he falls into to my bench, right? Unless he falls to a place where he's not one of my week 1 starters on my fantasy team. Sure. He won't be drafted by me. But I was really off on Ingram last year. I was telling everybody, don't touch him, don't touch him. And that's what happened. So sorry, Mark. Let's go to the receivers there. Not as much firepower, but a lot of young, exciting receivers on this team, led by Marquise Hollywood Brown. Miles Boykin from Notre Dame, might make that next step this year 2. We'll see. You mentioned Devin Duvernay, I think, out of Texas, drafted in the 3rd round. So there's a lot of young talent here, so that it makes the team better. But for me, there's no real viable starting options for wide receiver here. Hollywood Brown had the best year of everyone last year as far as their receivers go. That's still 46 receptions, 584 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. By no means some amazing stat line. And considering the fact that he had, I think, 2 pretty big games, there wasn't a lot of meat left on the bone for the other 12 games that he played in. So, are you looking at Marquise Brown as someone that can move up into that, flex wide receiver 3, range this year? Or do you think just because of the way this offense is, he's still going to be, too inconsistent to really kind of start regularly?
Yeah, right there. 100%. Too inconsistent. I can't take Marquise Brown. And again, this offense is Lamar Jackson's offense, right? I mean, if the running lanes are opening up and Ingram's ripping off some yards and Lamar Jackson's ripping off some yards, I mean, you're not going to get the ball in the air all that much, because why would you stop, right? I mean, if you're putting the ball on the ground, you're ripping off chunk yards. There's no reason to put the ball in the air. The other part, too, is that I think a guy like Hollywood Brown would be better served in an offense where you have that sort of cornerstone wide receiver on the other side, right? He could be a number 2 that can be matched up on a number 2 corner and hopefully try to get some separation over the top, especially off play action, right? I mean, we're talking about a team that likes to run the ball. So play action is how this guy's going to get open, because I don't think he can get enough separation on possession type of plays, which is going to increase how many times, and especially because most leagues are PPR now, is going to increase his numbers, right? So he's not going to have those games like not many people have Michael Thomas games, but he's not going to have those games where he goes out and has 8 catches for 114 and a touchdown.
Yeah, you're not going to get those 14 target type games,
Right.
Not going to really fall that way. You don't expect them to anyway. That being said, moving on, since we don't see that much value there, where you do get it is the tight end. That's where they throw the ball a lot, or at least that's where they threw the ball a lot last year. Led by Mark Andrews, wound up being the number 4 tight end. Now, people were kind of high on him going into the season last year, but by no means I don't think people were talking about him in that range when he was going to be up there with the top few guys. 64 receptions, 852 yards, and 10 pack of touchdowns. Last year was kind of weird because very few receivers got to 10 touchdowns. Cooper Kupp and Mark Andrews, I believe, might have been the only ones that reached double digits, which was very kind of weird. So they also threw the ball 80 more times than their other tight ends. They had 180 tight end targets, which is kind of astronomical. So you have Nick Boyle, who's still there at 43 targets. You have Hayden Hurst, who's now in Atlanta, has 39 vacated targets there. I feel like Mark Andrews is almost a lock to kind of repeat his numbers, maybe not the 10 touchdowns, but to kind of have a very similar stat line this year, and maybe even have 10, 20 more targets. But a lot of people seem to feel like that may not be the case. What side do you fall on Mark Andrews? Do you think his targets suffer because of the added, talent, or do you think he's locked in because of the vacated targets as a 100-target tight end?
I think he should probably get those 100 targets. And if for no other reason, then he is absolutely the only possession target that they have in this offense, right? And what better way from a pure football perspective to get a quarterback that is typically a sort of streaky type of thrower, to get him in the flow of the game, give him some nice, easy targets early on. That's where Mark Andrews comes in, right? I mean, some nice 7, 8-yard passes, some little hitches, let him sit down in the open parts of the zone, let Lamar Jackson kind of get in the flow of the game, and then your offense can kind of take off. So I think his targets will go up. I think those touchdowns will come down. So you may see the reception number go up. You may even see the yardage number go up, but you're going to see his fantasy points probably hang around the same area or dip because he's not going to have the touchdowns.
Yeah, I agree. 10 is going to be a hard nut to repeat. But we'll see. 36 touchdowns from Lamar in his rookie season. Threw a touchdown every 10 times he threw the ball. Pretty
right.
So, all right, let's move on here. We're going to go to Pittsburgh. We got a lot of other people to talk about in this division. So the Steelers, 8-8 somehow. They patched together an 8-8 season. That's got to give a lot of credit to Mike Tomlin. Not just Mike Tomlin, but that's great coaching. You know what I mean? To have to, really patchwork that team together over the year. Not only injuries to Big Ben for the entire season. Connor was in and out throughout the year. Smith-Schuster was, hurt a little bit, as well as his pride seemed to be hurt, maybe a little bit too. I don't know. He landed on the injury sheet for injured pride, but he might have. And, tight end was non-existent for this team. So With Big Ben coming back, the big question is how much of the old Pittsburgh offense from 5 years ago comes back this year. If you believe that, hey, Big Ben's back, they're going to be back and throwing the ball 45 plus times a game, 300 plus yards every game, then there's tons of value to be found. If you think they're going to fall more towards a little more ball control, playing tougher defense and maybe not throwing the ball that much, then these guys are probably pretty well, previewed so far. Where I'm seeing the ADP for Pittsburgh Steelers, I think it makes a lot of sense. I just think there's the ceiling for these guys that's a lot higher than most of the people that are in the range with them. So,
Right.
Big Ben coming back from the elbow injury. I think the year before he was number 2 or number 3 quarterback on the year in 2018. Do you think he falls right back in as a QB1, top 10, top 12 kind of guy?
I just think there's other quarterbacks out there that are going to put up the numbers, and you got to see him do it last year. I listen, this guy is getting a little long in the tooth, and his body has taken a beating through the time he's been in the NFL. I mean, we know he likes to hold on to the ball. We've seen his pump fakes. We've seen guys coming off the edge and hit him and just bounce off. But over time, it takes its toll. So I wonder if he's going to be able to come back at that level, which then impairs everybody else on the offense. Now, what I will say is those numbers for the other players on the offense are inherently going to go up because, let's be honest, Mason Crosby is not the answer. Okay, so just by having Ben Roethlisberger, I mean, Ben Roethlisberger at 60% is better than Mason Crosby at 100. So those numbers are going to go up for this
quarterback. They got bigger problems. I think Mason Rudolph maybe we're looking for. But if Mason Crosby's playing quarterback for
yeah.
going to be a big
Yeah, Mason Rudolph. Yeah, that's right. Oklahoma State. Sorry, Mason Crosby. I guess I had Green Bay on the brain for a second.
And then Duck Hodges for a while. So, it was just kind of tough going. One of the big winners, I think, for a lot of people for Pittsburgh this year is James Conner by way of nothing else happened.
Right.
I think most people thought they were in the market for a running back. They did draft a running back, Anthony McFarland, in the 4th round out of Maryland. But that's not the kind of draft capital that you concern yourself with in year 1. Benny Snell was not very good in the opportunities that he got last year. Jalen Samuel was a little bit better, but I still think works better in that, scarcely used kind of gadget, kind of position. So James Conner is really set to be a volume workhorse.
Absolutely.
This season. And even if he's not great, I think he's going to be right back in that RB1 discussion. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. He should be the one who's the offense should kind of be going through him at this point. The guy came from a rough situation in college with the illness and coming back. I mean, the guy's just an absolute warrior. And we've seen him actually just outplay Le'Veon Bell. I mean, people can say what they want about Le'Veon not showing up and all that. Listen, with him in the running back position, they really didn't skip a beat from that perspective. Now, when you start to have other injuries and you got, Antonio Brown going walkabout and, all the other things going on, that affects other aspects of on-field play. But, yeah, he should definitely, that offense, he should be touching the ball 20 to 25, if not more times a game. And I think there's huge value there for James Conner. I think he's a good back too. Anthony McFarland's a good back out of Maryland, but he's just good. And I think he's there specifically for depth talent, just in case something happens. Let's make sure that we have somebody to back up. And Benny Snell, you hit it right on the head. There was a lot of people that really liked him coming out of college, coming out of Kentucky. This maybe should be a lesson for a lot of people that pay attention to the draft and say, oh, he plays in the SEC. He's going to be good in the AFC North because it's kind of a black and blue division and they need a, downhill guy like that. He was non-existent. He doesn't have the speed. He doesn't have the things that you look for a back at that level. And playing against SEC talent is much different from playing against the talent and the men in the AFC North. It's just a fact. So, I think that Conner is the guy. If there's anybody on this offense I'm looking to, it's James Conner.
Yeah, right now it looks like, of course it depends on where you look, and it's very early in the mock draft season. But I'm seeing him, near RB18, which is going to put him, into the third round. And if he's my RB2, or if I go wide receiver stacked, and he's my wide, I'm feeling good with him in the third round right now.
Right.
I really am. I was kind of off from last year, for a couple of different reasons. And, I'm definitely back on the Connor train for this year. I think he was a big winner of the off season for the Steelers there. Receiver is kind of a weird spot for the Steelers this year. They're returning basically the same, team they had last year as far as the receiver corps. Added Chase Claypool, big bodied receiver from Notre Dame in the second round. A lot of people really high on him, although I think he's at best going to slot in as the third, receiver at best. So the big question here is, Juju Smith-Schuster, a couple of years ago, huge amount of targets as the number 2 in a Big Ben-led offense, 160-plus targets in a year where AB also had, 160 or 170, whatever he had.
Sure.
So is there reason to believe that you can't have 2 wide receivers in this offense that are going to have 130, 140, maybe more targets? And if that does happen, are both Deontay Johnson and Juju Smith-Schuster very undervalued right now?
Yeah, I mean, if it aligns that way, yeah, they're undervalued. There's no reason to think they can't get those targets, but you're putting a lot on Ben Roethlisberger staying healthy for the entire season and playing at a high level, coming off that injury, and then also the philosophy, right? I mean, one of the things that we don't know. I mean, they're going to know more about where their quarterback is in his rehab than we are. So their philosophy could go through a bit of a shift. And maybe early in the season, that philosophy is, hey, he's not quite where we want him to be. So let's run the football. Let's manage these games that way. And then maybe later in the season, he starts throwing the ball more because he's at a better place. There's a lot that goes into that question. There's no reason to think it couldn't happen. I just think with James Conner, and remember, I've liked this guy for years. I'm not quite sure why he doesn't get used more, but James Washington as a slot guy, I think could take away and vulture some of those targets away. He was starting to get a little bit of a rapport with Ben Roethlisberger, and then Ben Roethlisberger goes down. Yeah. So I would like to see him utilized more. So that's why I say they might be in a situation where they want to spread the ball around more as opposed to 2 guys just getting all the targets going their way.
Well, I'm going to tell you one thing. Deontay Johnson might be on every freaking team.
Right.
Very possible. Unless his preseason ADP starts soaring, out of nowhere. This guy would be on a lot of my freaking rosters. I'm excited about it. So go to tight end.
You're not alone. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to do the same thing. And it's just a matter of, where can you get them? Is the value there? There's going to be a lot of different factors that go into it.
Yeah, I mean, the last I looked, he was like in the 11th round. And like I said, it's really early. He'll go up from there. But if he's 8th round or later, I'll be on him like white on rice, baby.
Right.
All right. They brought Ebron in. Eric Ebron, pretty interesting guy to bring in for Pittsburgh. The Vance McDonald story just, hasn't panned out. They give it a couple of years. And, I think Ebron is going to be quite clearly the number 1 tight end on this team, even though McDonald is still on the roster. And there's no reason to think that Ebron's not going to be the main target and definitely the red zone target, which is probably the bigger story here.
Right.
So Ebron, you think worth a flyer as a back-end tight end 1, or got to be a wait and see with the offense?
It's got to be a wait and see. Ben Roethlisberger, since Heath Miller, has never really used his tight ends all that much. They don't really seem to factor into his thought process, when you're watching them play. I mean, he's always trying to get the ball to the outside, it seems. And when they are, utilizing the middle of the field or the seams, it seems like they're utilizing a wide receiver or a slot guy or something like that, or even getting their running backs out into those areas. So, yeah, I think it's a wait and see. Look, Eric Ebron, though, is one of those guys that if he is proven early on this season, they're going to use him. He's good for a good pop for probably about 4 or 5 weeks. Yeah. So where he gets hot and they do use him and he's a pretty reliable target that you can get some points. But then once he goes missing, he goes in the witness protection program, and it's over.
Yeah, I mean, I see him as like a touchdown-dependent streaming option.
That's right.
Season unless something changes. There's absolutely going to be 2 or 3 games where he scores twice, maybe a couple where he scores 3 times, and a whole bunch of 25-yard no touchdown games.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if you hit the right week, if you Nostradamus it, then good on you. But I'm just not going to be able to draft him. I'm always a punt and wait and see guy with tight ends pretty much.
Especially now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I went off of that last year, and you know what happened? I drafted O.J. Howard and Evan Ingram. So it was basically just affirmation that I've always been correct and just tight ends. So Eric Ebron's going to be interesting to me as a red zone guy, more about taking red zone targets away from everybody else, I think, as opposed to him being, a value target. So, all right, let's roll in this AFC North here. Who's next? The Cleveland Browns.
Okay.
So, did they win the offseason again this year? Very possibly. They seem to be in the running every year.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that if you're looking for a team in this particular division that won the offseason, and a lot of times, a majority of that, we're talking about the draft. I would say that might have been Baltimore this year in that division. I mean, they drafted pretty well. They got some pieces on defense that I think fit, a lot of their needs. But the Cleveland Browns added a lot of athleticism to a team that's already young, talented, and athletic,
Well, they went ahead and turned over the front office again. New head coach Kevin Stefanski, offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt, defensive coordinator Joe Wood. So, whole new cast of characters again. You got to hope at some point, they find the right mix and, learn a new playbook every year, learn a new relationship with a new coach. I mean, I really feel like, especially with a personality like Baker, that consistency would be huge for him.
Sure.
A leader, a real leader with, that great kind of presence in the locker room that can be respectful and not, kind of treat him like a child, but, really give him that confidence. And, you can't do that with a different guy every year.
Right.
Just don't have trust.
And their major issue was, John Dorsey, their general manager, he goes out, he has a nice draft, he stacks this roster, he gets talent, he moves some guys around, and he forgot 2 crucial aspects of having a young team. He didn't get his franchise quarterback and offensive line, and he didn't go get a proven veteran coach that's going to walk in the room and command respect. He went out, he got a first-time head coach because he had 6 good games as an offensive coordinator. Absolute miss. And now we're on to another coach, which again, detrimental for the growth of those young players. Because like you said, new system, new guys to learn and understand how they work. They understand how you work. It takes a whole mix of things to come together to have a nice season. Alex Van Pelt is a very interesting guy. He was in Green Bay for a while. Aaron Rodgers liked him a lot, wanted him to stay there. So he definitely is liked by his quarterbacks, and he's a former quarterback as well. I think he'll be good for Baker Mayfield. Yep. The question is, again, with this team, you can only play the game with one football.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about the moves because, they didn't get an experienced coach. They did change coach. They did, however, address the offensive line. Went out and grabbed Jack Conklin, free agency, paid him a lot of money. Used their number 1 draft pick on Jedrick Wills, number 10, Alabama. So they're doing what they can to protect, Baker Mayfield. So hopefully that'll pan out for them. They also went ahead and drafted, a good blocking tight end, Harrison Bryant. They brought in Austin Hooper, who's a solid blocking tight end. And they brought in Case Keenum, which I think is very underrated, just as a mentor to Baker Mayfield, a guy that he doesn't have to feel very threatened by as far as, losing a starting job unless he plays awful or gets right. I mean, I don't think there's anything that can happen in the preseason that's going to make this a QB controversy. Keenum's there to be a solid backup, to be a veteran presence, and hopefully a mentor. So I like all those moves. I love all those moves. So, Baker last year was number 19. A lot of people had him in the top half of the QB1, projections, number 6, number 7, number 8, things like that. Didn't pan out that way. Under 60% completion percentage, under 4,000 yards, 22 touchdowns, 21 picks. Wasn't a great season. It's not due to a lack of offensive weapons. So, it comes down to either you think the system, wasn't implemented well or it wasn't a good system put forward by the coaches, or, we think maybe Baker's not going to get there. Right now, not for 2020, but do you think Baker's going to get there as a top-tier quarterback in the league some point in the next few years?
No. I don't think he's a top-tier quarterback, but I think he'll be a good kind of middle-of-the-road sort of guy. I think he'll be a quarterback that you can win with. I think he's a quarterback that can get you deep in the playoffs. Yeah. I think he may – I'm not sure about the longevity, but he could turn out to be kind of a Matt Hasselbeck guy. Okay. A guy who is very, very solid. It turns out to be a good professional. I mean, listen, I know he's, smaller in stature. He moves well. He's got a good arm, and he can make all the throws. I question in between the ears, which obviously differentiates him from Matt Hasselbeck. But then that's where the coaching comes in, is to help him with that. So no, over the course of the next couple of years, I don't think he's a, QB1 through honestly QB8, but is he 9 through 12 or 14? Maybe.
All right. So 19 last year, the question becomes, other than, really deep leagues or 2 quarterback leagues, do you think someone drafts him and says, hey, he's still got the weapons, and if he turns it around, the ceiling's there, and if he doesn't, boom, I dump him and I grab whoever else is out there, Cousins or, Goff or, any number of guys that can get you 15 points a game as a quarterback.
Right.
You're hoping for those 20-plus, games, but lots of guys out there to get you those 15 points. So, are you taking a flyer on Baker if you're one of those guys that drafts QBs late, and it's getting into that 11th round, 12th round, and now you're looking at, that whole big blob of guys between, QB 11 and 18, what have you. Is he one of those guys that stands out, or are you kind of off him at this point? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, at that point in the draft, yeah, I would be one of those people that would take a flyer on him. Like you said, I mean, listen, you beefed up the offensive line, you got some help there, and the weapons are still on the offense. Now, who knows what's going to happen with OBJ? I mean, is somebody going to piss in this guy's Cheerios in the morning and then he doesn't want to play? I mean, who has any idea, right? But the fact remains is that the talent's still there. I mean, you have Nick Chubb. You've got options all over the place. Jarvis Landry. I mean, we can keep going through that list. Njoku, they went and got Austin Hooper. I mean, you've got so many options to go around. The question is, do you almost, in a sense, have too many options, to the point where, we know how temperamental OBJ is. I can imagine that Jarvis Landry, even though I've heard he's a really good teammate, if he's not touching the ball, he's probably not happy. So, when does that start to manifest itself, right? I mean, if Austin Hooper and David Njoku and Nick Chubb and Baker Mayfield go out and have a huge game and they win, what's the T minus to those guys blowing up and throwing a wrench into it? I mean, these are all factors to take into mind. But to get back to your question, yes, I would take a flyer on him 10th, 11th, 12th round. There's just too much talent there. And at that point, I'm hoping that I'm looking at him as not the part that's going to make my team go, but a part that's just going to help my team go.
Yeah, and that's usually where I'm drafting. I'm typically, very, very rarely drafting a quarterback in the first 10 rounds or so, because a lot of years I wind up with Ben Roethlisberger or I wind up with Phil Rivers, and other half the teams have already drafted a backup quarterback by the time I draft my starting quarterback. It's just too easy to get points out of quarterbacks. I'll be looking at him, though. You're right. I'll be looking at him rising to the cream of the crop in that section of quarterbacks before the season. If I'm looking at, like I mentioned, Kirk Cousins or, Jared Goff, and I'm looking at those guys, he's probably going to be at the top of that list for me. Let's look at his weapons here. So, again, other than Austin Hooper, a lot of the pieces brought in were about foundational pieces. They still have a lot of the same guys here. One of the most talented backfields in the league, if not the most talented 1-2 punch. Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. We know Hunt only played in the last 9 games after suspension. Nick Chubb played in all 16 games and wound up as the number 7 running back. Consensus rankings have him in the top 10 for most formats. For me, I have him closer to the mid-tier RB2, number 18, and the reason is the receiving work and the talent of Hunt. At the end of the day, it's too hard to keep a guy like that off the field that often. It has nothing to do with Nick Chubb. So you look at the numbers last year. Chubb ran the ball 300 times, 1,500 yards. 5 yards a carry. You can't sneeze at that. One of the highest averages for that many carries for the season. 8 touchdowns. Now through the air for the season, he was 36 of 49 targets, 278 yards. Didn't find the end zone. Kareem Hunt in 9 games had 1 more catch than him, a few less targets, more yards, only got in the end zone once. But when you were watching the games, you saw the difference between the receiving ability of Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb, decent pass catching running back. Kareem Hunt is an exceptional pass catching running back. And when you started seeing those 2 running back sets, you saw how dangerous that offense could become.
Sure.
So I don't know that I'm not drafting Nick Chubb. He's just not going to be my RB1. End of the day, unless I stack a couple of receivers, Nick Chubb is not my RB1. I'm in the minority. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to pay attention to, and I know that we talk about fantasy football, we talk about the numbers and things like that, but when you get back to a pure football perspective, you're exactly right. You can't keep a guy with that much talent off the field. He's going to find his way on the field. They went out, they drafted Brian Herrien from Georgia as well. So that leads me to think that maybe Kareem Hunt's on his way out the door. I thought that when they signed him, that was one of those situations where they thought, okay, we're going to sign this guy, maybe not sure what we have in Nick Chubb because he was a rookie. So they thought, not sure how much is in the tank. He did have a pretty nasty injury at Georgia while he was there. And now it's turned out that he's pretty good. That leads me to believe that maybe Kareem Hunt is kind of trade bait for a team that thinks that they could use a running back that's going to push them over the top. And not only that, you brought it up, a guy that catches the ball well out of the backfield, right? So is he now trade bait for you to get something that you want?
Yeah, some other team, that first injury that goes down, and then
you got it.
Who's out there?
Right.
Oh, I can get a guy that 2 years ago was a top 5 running back. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. What, 26? I mean, still young even for a running back. He's still in the range. So
I mean, now you have to deal with his off the field stuff. I mean, he just didn't he get pulled over for something recently again?
Yeah, nothing's going to come of it, but at the end of the day, he got arrested for, basically weed, and then he was telling the officer, damn, I can't get in trouble again for weed.
Yeah, and again, but you see, those are things, again, you have to take into account, right? I mean, from the fantasy football perspective, we only give a shit if the dude's putting up numbers and playing on Sunday.
Yeah.
As a football team, right, you have to take all that into consideration. So, I think that he may be on his way out the door in Cleveland, which leads me to believe that Nick Chubb and Brian Herrien are going to be your guys. And that tells me that Nick Chubb's getting, a bulk of the touches.
If you tell me preseason that Kareem Hunt is gone, Nick Chubb's a top 6 running back.
Right.
I mean, that's it. Falls right back up.
And I'm saying it wouldn't happen until at the earliest week 4. You might be even looking at more like week 9 or 10.
Yeah, and most of the fantasy season's over at that point.
Right.
Damage done. I don't think you're going to be in any trouble if you draft Nick Chubb. That's not what I'm saying at all. He's probably going to have 1,200 plus yards on the ground. He'll pitch in a little bit with the receptions. He's going to be just fine. It's just that I can't put him above some of these other guys with the higher ceilings. I'm looking at Josh Jacobs as a guy I'll have above him. A few other guys, Kenyon Drake, just some guys that have higher ceilings.
Right.
Wind up projecting and ranking higher.
And I agree with that. One area to look at also, if you're looking at and you're in your fantasy draft and you're looking at Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt and you're thinking, I don't know really what's going to go on here. I'm of the opinion that if you take one, you almost have to take the other.
Yeah.
In case Nick Chubb goes down, then you have the guy who's getting a bulk of the touches. And if you get or somebody snakes Nick Chubb before you, maybe you wait a little while and you pick up Kareem Hunt with the idea that maybe Nick Chubb goes down due to injury, and then you have the guy. So there's a couple different things there, but I think you're right. I think Nick Chubb's definitely going over 1,000 yards on the ground again. I think he's probably been working on his pass catching. I don't know if that really will have a bearing on him getting any more balls out of the backfield because, again, there's just too many options there. You've got 2 tight ends. You've got 2 stud receivers. And you still have Antonio Callaway as a wide receiver in the slot who's a burner. So, I mean, there's so many different ways to go. I just don't know. Oh, I'm sorry. You have Donovan Peoples-Jones that they added. There's just a ton of guys.
Yeah. No, there are. I mean, who's the number 3 is definitely a question, right? Damian Ratley, Higgins
Right.
there, Callaway's there, as you mentioned. I think the bigger question is, does it really matter who the number 3 is for fantasy purposes? I don't think it does.
No, it doesn't.
But let's talk about 1 and 2 then, right? Because Landry again outplayed OBJ. They both had fine seasons. It's about expectations, right? When you drafted Landry, you were happy. You got the number 13 wide receiver. No way you drafted him as a number 13 wide receiver. You drafted him probably in the 30s. Not overall as a in the wide receiver. You probably drafted him in the 30s.
Sure.
And got the number 13. OBJ you drafted as a top 10, top 12 wide receiver, and you got the number 26. Again, you didn't kill you. I mean, you just didn't have any of those games. There were no games where he blew up or he made the play happen. I'm starting to wonder, if we're ever going to see that again. I think the time is over to think about OBJ as a wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think that we may start to find out here that Jarvis Landry is just a more well-rounded receiver. Just better hands. Maybe he fits in the offense better. Maybe he's got a better rapport with his quarterback. Whatever it may be, I tend to agree with you. I'm not quite sure that OBJ's head is in it anymore. The reports came out. He might be looking for a way out of Cleveland. Look, when are we going to learn with this guy? When are teams going to learn with this guy, right? I mean, he didn't want to be with Eli Manning and Saquon Barkley and the New York Giants. He wanted out. They trade him to Cleveland. He goes to Cleveland. He doesn't have the season he wants. All of a sudden, now he wants out of Cleveland. I mean, when is it going to stop?
It's like I want to offer OBJ a contract. It's worth anywhere from $9 to $48 million a year. And it's all incentive-based. It's all incentive-based. That's it. So, 18 yard receiving and 24 touchdowns, you make $50 million this year. And he'll probably get close to it. That's the kind of talent he is, and that's what pisses you off more than anything else.
And if he doesn't perform, the only thing you're out is a pack of Newports.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
And I don't think there's anybody that would happen, right? I really do think that first contract and all the commercials and shit just blew up his head so fast.
Well, and let's make sure we understand too. The guy made his mark and his name on the NFL with that ridiculous highlight catch in the front corner of the end zone, right? I mean, I hate to make this correlation because it may not, land for some people, but remember he's in Seattle now, but South Carolina defensive end Jadeveon Clowney, right? I mean, he made his name by putting an absolute huge hit on a Michigan running back. And he really, number 1 overall pick, and he never really lived up to it. I mean, just look at his numbers. I mean, he has not lived up to that idea of what he was going to be. And I feel like OBJ is a very similar guy, right? I mean, huge highlight reel catch. He makes some highlight reel plays. He has some good moments. And you think, holy crap, this guy could be one of the greats of all time. And then he just goes walkabout. You don't know where his head's at. You don't know what he's doing. He's not really into it. And then here's what you get.
So the ceiling, though, is still got to be there with the age, the physical skills. So with the ceiling we know he has, just physically, again, that same question, at what round do you feel like you cannot pass up OBJ? What's the round where you're like, all right, I mean, another round go. I just got to pull the trigger.
Yeah, I think one thing to, you said he was wide receiver 26 last year.
Yep.
That might be more who he is now.
Yeah.
He might be a guy that's almost sort of a decoy in a lot of ways, right? I mean, like you said, the talent's still there, the age, there's not a lot of miles on him. He doesn't take a lot of huge hits, but he may be that guy that the highest he gets anymore is like wide receiver 17 or 18,
Yeah.
right? So for me, and even to, preface this with the talent being there and everything else, I'm thinking that when I get, because like I said, there's a lot of receivers out there. When I get to maybe round 9, 10, and if he's still hanging around out there, that's for me when I pull the trigger and go, I can't wait anymore.
So, right now it looks like, again, mock drafts are very early, but, it looks like the number 26 wide receiver, who's not, OBJ, but the number 26 wide receiver is going in the middle of the 5th round.
Yeah.
For me, I was going to say 6th round, because at that point I've got, my 2 running backs, my 2 receivers. I probably have another flex piece and another bench piece. And then I'm home run hitting. And that's
different. Yeah. But again, that's fine. I totally understand that. And like, when I say I wouldn't, 9 or 10 is when I pull the trigger, that's just for me. My main thing with that situation is you just don't know what you're going to get. And with as many receivers as we have in this league that are now starting to prove themselves and are starting to take that step, and maybe it's a guy that's a little less proven than OBJ, but he's trending upwards. I'd rather have a guy like that than spend a pick on OBJ.
All right, Austin Hooper, big money to go to Cleveland, was one of the top few scoring tight ends for the first part of the year until he got hurt. Came back the last few games of the season, didn't really put up those same kind of numbers. But, what do you think? Are you buying into Hooper as the kind of guy that can be a top 6 tight end? Or does he go back to being just a guy, that you keep an eye on and see what happens?
Yeah, keep an eye on him and see what happens. I don't know that listen, there's not going to be Matt Ryan and Julio Jones walking through that door. So you've absolutely put him in a position where he now is not going in to an offense that has a bunch of veterans that know it inside and out. He's going into an offense where these guys are still feeling their way through it because it's all new to them too. So he walked into a situation in Atlanta where those guys knew everything about that offense and all he had to do was handle himself. Now he's walking in where nobody knows anything and they all got to learn it together, which could work down the line, could work later on in this season, or it could work, next season or a couple years. I think for me, even though it's a big money signing, he's a guy, it's a wait and see approach for me. And drafting him, I can't put him in my top probably 6 or 7 tight ends to start the season.
Yeah, and I hear that. It's very tough to do that. He looked so good, so I get it. The talent's there, and they paid him buku bucks. That always makes you feel like they're going to want to integrate him, that much faster. But yeah, I can't anoint him into that top half yet. The players with big numbers. It's just too rich there. I'll definitely be targeting him though. If he gets, if he falls past like tight end 9, gets to that 10, 11, 12, I'll probably, start looking at him right around there. So
right.
All right, let's move on to our last team, the Cincinnati Bengals, and I'm glad actually that they made their decision on Dalton, before we got to this episode because
sure,
with the lack of a possible lack of a preseason, I thought it was possible that Burrow doesn't get to come right in and start, maybe because just a weird offseason, right? You don't get to spend time in camp, you don't get to meet the coaches, face to face, and do timing routes with your receivers and stuff like that. Now I think we're getting closer to looking like we might have a somewhat chance at a normal, close to normal season and normally timed season. And we know Andy Dalton's gone. He's in Dallas.
Right.
So there's no question Joe Burrow is starting day 1, right?
Yeah, no, there isn't any question now. I mean, we talked about it during the draft. I thought that if Andy Dalton was still going to be there, it was going to be hard for Joe Burrow walking in to overtake him. I mean, now you're talking about that quarterback room being Joe Burrow, Ryan Finley, and Jake Dolegala. I mean, he's walking in. He's starting from day 1. There's no question.
Yeah. All right. So, we're going to go forward with that, obviously as the expectation here for the rest of the pieces because fact of the matter is, for a 2-14 team, decent amount of skill players over there. Let's go to the backfield here with Joe Mixon. Mixon is top 10 in most people's rankings right now. Wound up as the number 13 back last year. Really a tale of two halves. Really kind of an ugly start to the season for him. And then really kind of exploded near the back end of the season. Really showed out, in a pretty big way. Helped his own cause there. So which half of the season is the Joe Mixon we're going to get this year? Is he an RB1 or is he not?
I think he's an RB1. Joe Mixon catches the ball very well out of the backfield. He's an explosive guy. If you noticed last year at the beginning part of the season, I don't think he was 100% healthy. He looked like he lacked that burst, and it looked like it was affecting his vision. And for some guys that aren't 100%, they don't know how to play under a new normal. So when they're not 100%, they can't get themselves mentally right to be able to play. I think that was kind of some of what was happening with him last season. But toward the end of the season, you started seeing him get that burst back. He started getting his mentality back. I think that's more of who Joe Mixon is. I think he's a running back one. And you're talking about having a rookie quarterback, which I assume with the way that he functioned in his college career, they're going to look to have an offense somewhat similar to what the Baltimore Ravens do, with a little bit of RPO stuff so that Joe Mixon can get comfortable with, run the ball a little bit, move the chains, and then open up those plays down the field. I think that Joe Mixon is going to have a nice season fantasy-wise.
Yeah, man, I really like Mixon. I'm going to have him just outside my RB1, I think. He'll probably wind up very close to where he finished last year, 13 through 15. He'll probably be where he winds up in my rankings. A lot of that's offensive line questions. And a lot of that is, even though they do have weapons on the outside, I'm worried about defenses really stacking the box against this team and forcing Burrow to beat them and throw the ball.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
Yeah, but by no means do I have him having a bad year. I just think that, there's some factors that keep him from just elevating up into that top, that second, running back tier. I think he just kind of hits right in the top of that third tier. Right. But I love that they just keep Mixon and Gio Bernard, because you know what Gio Bernard is. He's a change of pace back. He's there when you need him. He can catch the passes. He blocks pretty well, but he's not any danger to take away, Joe Mixon's share of the offense.
Sure.
So,
that's right.
Let's talk about the wide receivers here. There's quite a lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
So not only are they there, but they actually performed to one degree or another when they were called upon. You look at some of these guys, and Alex Erickson, Auden Tate, right? Still John Ross hanging around.
Right.
Draft T. Higgins, who was one of my top receivers. I wanted him to go earlier. The fact that he fell in the second round, I thought there were teams that messed up passing on him in the first round. And then not to mention Tyler Boyd and AJ Green coming back off of injury. So I want you to help me with a little exercise here. Just start from the number one wide receiver through, let's say, number 5 on Cincinnati for this season, just for this season, not going forward, but
right.
the year. Put those in order. Who's got the most points, 1 through 5? What do you think?
Okay, that's interesting. AJ Green, I think is where you have to start. I think he's going to have the most points. I think he's going to be healthy. I think that he's going to be ready to go. I think he's going to be a little reinvigorated. They got themselves a new quarterback. Don't get me wrong. Andy Dalton did some nice things, but he was never going to be the answer to get you to that next level. And when you have a new guy come in with maybe a different sort of energy, I think that reinvigorates some of the veteran players. Yeah. I think that he's going to have a good season. If Joe Burrow is anything remotely close to what most talent evaluators think he is, I think AJ Green has a big season. And that could be just from a simple standpoint of, this team doesn't have a great defense. It's going to have for the most part, work in progress offense, but that means you're going to be playing a lot of games from behind, right? So You're going to be chucking the ball around the yard and letting this kid figure it out as you go. So I'd say AJ Green is 1. I'd say 2 for me. would be Auden Tate.
Uh,
Yeah, I would say Auden Tate. I'm not a huge John Ross fan.
yeah.
So I think he's going to be down at the bottom of that 5. So I would go Auden Tate, probably Tyler Boyd, Alex Erickson, and then John Ross.
Yeah.
But I don't look. I know he's a speedster. I know he's a straight burner. Take the top off the defense. I just don't know how he factors into those plans sometimes, and he goes missing in a lot of games.
Yeah, and I know it's not the same skill set, but I just feel like T. Higgins will supplant Ross as the extra receiver that does something different, right? Because AJ does everything. Tyler Boyd's that possession receiver. Auden Tate's the big, monstrous, red zone target. And then I think T. Higgins is also a big target, but in a different way than Auden Tate is. A little more speed, a little more separation, wins more 50-50 balls. I think when you go up against Auden Tate, you're less than 50-50.
Yeah, I'm not as bullish on T. Higgins as a lot of people. I'll tell you why. The last memory I have of watching him play was one of the best corners in the country last year, Jeff Okudah, who went number 3 to the Detroit Lions. And Jeff Okudah did a lot against him. I mean, he really kind of shut him down for the most part.
Yep.
So that tells me that he has some sort of issue with getting separation against top tier corners. And let's make no mistake about it. Now coming into the NFL, he's going to see guys like Marcus Peters, a veteran corner who's going to understand how to play against a young guy. And I think that's one of the hardest things for receivers to understand when they go from college to the NFL, which makes them a liability when it comes to fantasy. And sometimes a lot of them don't see the field, right? You see this guy, you think, oh, he's going to touch the ball a ton. I'm going to take him. I'm going to plug him in my lineup, and I'm going to get points. And it doesn't work out. It's because they have gotten used to, in college, out-talenting the guy on the other side of the ball from them. Get to the NFL, you can't do that anymore. Now it's about technique. It's about release. It's about how you use your hands, how you separate, your speed, your everything. Everything comes into play. It's a battle every single play, and some of these guys can't do it. My fear is T. Higgins might be one of those guys.
So, it's interesting to me that you had Boyd down at third, just because of the target sharing, the 148 targets last year now. But Green is definitely going to, eat into that, so we know that. For me, I've got Green, Boyd, Tate, and Higgins as the top 4 with Erickson as number 5. I think Ross is going to be out, before they go. What's going on there, man? You got mood lighting?
Yeah. I finally had to turn the light on. It was getting a little dark, and the windows are on the other side. So yeah.
Me, I was like, I haven't even started drinking yet. I was like, I'm trying to be good today, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, man.
Yeah, you want to hear something crazy? I haven't had a beer or a cigarette in 2 months and 2 days.
Come on.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
Hey, congrats. That's great, man.
I lost 25 pounds too.
That is also great, man. You got to shave it all off, man. We got to let it show it off.
I know, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I still got a long way to go, but I felt it was about time to drop some of that beer weight.
Well, all right. So let's see. This year, we're going to hopefully get together. You're going to drink some ginger ale. I'll drink some beer maybe when I watch.
No, during football season, I'll be back to drinking beer. Make no mistake about that.
So Joe Burrow, do you think he can be good enough this year that the receiving options are worthy of being drafted, where they're being looked at right now? Or, do you think he's going to struggle like most rookie quarterbacks do?
Yeah, I think he struggles maybe, especially early in the season. A lot of times the main issue for young quarterbacks is the speed, right? I mean, we hear that all the time. But also when you're talking about Joe Burrow and we're talking about a new NFL, this I do believe is going to be kind of an RPO offense. So they'll give him some nice, easy throws. They'll let him run the ball a little more, give him something that's more digestible at a quicker pace for him. So I think early on in the season, he might struggle a little bit. And I haven't looked at their schedule, but I think overall his wide receivers will get those numbers. It will justify itself because, like I said, they're going to be playing a lot of games from behind, I think. Yep. And as a result, those wide receivers are going to get the opportunity to catch a lot of passes.
Yeah, he's either the kind of kid that's going to take his shots. You know,
Yeah,
I don't
we
think
will.
shy about going for it. They are going to be down. The expectations are going to be low, and why not go out there and try to learn? Best way to
Right.
learn is to go out there and make some mistakes. Try some things, see what works, what doesn't. I think it's going to be a rocky year, but I do think you're going to be able to mine this team for a little fantasy gold if you work it right.
Yeah, I mean, if you're taking guys off this team, you have to be prepared that when you're playing somebody and you're relying on a Cincinnati Bengal player, that it's very, very possible that you could be going into the late third quarter, early fourth quarter of that game and desperately needing them to do something. And they do
Yeah.
because they're behind. And all of a sudden, those points start rolling up late in the game because they're just scoring garbage time points.
Yeah. Those 3, 4, 5 receptions on that one drive. We all
That's it.
love it, except when it's happening to you.
Right. Exactly.
So, all right, man. Well, that's it for the AFC North. Really appreciate your time. Thanks again for coming back on and helping us out. You told us you're going to come back and help us with the NFC South, right?
Yeah, NFC South. There's a ton of players in the NFC South. That's going to be a really interesting one. I think during this episode, a lot of what we talked about with these players are kind of what-if scenarios. I don't know that in the NFC South that there's too many what-if scenarios. A lot of those guys, what you're going to get, and we know kind of the trajectory of where those teams are going.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, New Orleans, Atlanta, we kind of know what's going on there. Carolina, you get a feeling of what they're going for. The big question marks, Tampa Bay. What did I see? Oh, it was so terrible. What did I read today? They tried to trademark the Tampa Bay Gronkaneers.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. Enough with that. Come on, man.
Freaking awful. I was so happy about all of this until I heard that shit.
Right. Yeah, no, that's trashy. That's trashy.
Yeah. But no, definitely looking forward to that. So we'll try to get to that hopefully in the next week or so. We'll get this episode up here soon. And thanks again for your time, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Hey, all right. That's going to do it for us, everybody. That's another great show in the books. Thank you very much again, Mike McNaughton, for helping us out today, previewing the AFC North. So that's 3 divisions out of the AFC already in the books. We've gone through the West, the East, the North. So you know what's next, the AFC South. My good buddy Gage Scott going to come in, help us out with that division coming up soon. Make sure you go to our YouTube page, subscribe to our channel, like and share all the videos, please. All we're doing is trying to help you get ready for the next season. Make sure you're not another statistic. You're another champion. All right, have a good one.